On to Adou Thiero. I think that's how you say it. Thiero? I don't know. I didn't look it up. To be honest, I've had a really long day. So now for the YouTube listeners, you'll notice that there is one less square here. But for our listeners, Coop could not make these two. He is his girl is having a birthday, and he's got to go put in that new husband work. So he's enjoying his time there, but sending our love to Coop. If you guys don't know, he is absolutely the backbone of everything we do at Upside Swings, and I want to surprise him a little bit by getting to hear this. Coop, we love you, and we hope you're doing great. But we have work to do, Stone. We got to talk about Arkansas's Adou Thiero. Now, Thiero is had a really interesting kind of like preseason expectation because he was not like a crazy highly recruited guy out of high school, but he goes to Kentucky, spends 2 years at Kentucky, slowly kind of grows in terms of his prospectum and his ability to earn minutes and all this stuff. And then he has a really big junior year for a bad Arkansas team. And then he gets hurt and he misses their kind of surprising tournament run, right? Where they beat Kansas and then they beat St. John's and made the Sweet 16. He missed that. He was hurt for those games. So Thiero is measured at the combine at 6'6" and a quarter with a 7-foot wingspan and an 8 foot 8 inch and a half 8.5 inch standing reach. Goodness gracious, I can't talk. So basically, he's 6'7", 6'7" and a half. He might even get a 6'8" list. That would be a little bit much. But a real 6'7" with a 7-foot wingspan. He's real 3, maybe even 4 sized when you take into account that he has 10 and a quarter inch hands, or excuse me, 9-inch hands, 9 by 10 and a quarter. He's gigantic hands, really strong, big, broad shoulders. As a junior this year, he averaged in 27 and a half minutes, only 27 games, but in 27 and a half minutes, he averaged 15 points, 5.8 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 1.6 steals, 0.7 blocks, 1.7 turnovers on 54.5, 25.6, 68.6 shooting splits. Just a really overall very productive player. Had a positive assist to turnover ratio, which is always good. Some things that really pop. He dunked 45 times, Stone. And for those that did not watch, Arkansas was not a well-spaced team. That team had very few above average shooters, and he dunked 45 times. Multiple, and we'll talk about this, but multiple of those self-created in the half court. Had 116 offensive rating, 25.9 usage, 60.5 true shooting, 56.7 effective field goal percentage, 7.7 offensive rebound rate, 15.9 defensive rebound rate, 14% assist rate, 13.6 turnover rate, 2.9 block rate, 3.4 steal rate, a 69.2 free throw rate. Shot 68% total on close twos per Bar Torvik, 48.8% on 82 far twos, and then only took 43 total threes to get to that 25.6 number. A couple other things worth noting on layups overall, he only shot 49%, and in the half court on layups, he shot 47%. So the at rim numbers stay pretty good, right? In the half court, 58.8%. He had 16 half court dunks. In the full court, or in totality, he was still in the 74th percentile at rim, but it is worth noting that the actual layup number is bad. Stone, where do the place to start with him? With almost all these guys, we're going to start on the defensive end, but Thiero is a little different. We have to start with the offense and the driving and the finishing and the athleticism. So just how good of a downhill driver and scorer is Thiero?
I would say very good, with the caveat that the handle is not great, and I think that puts a cap really on what he is as a downhill driver. He's extremely strong, extremely physical, someone that does not shy away from contact in the least. I think that the he's so good at finding like these little windows of opportunity, and the handle's good enough to exploit that. There's times where he recognizes that a defender is at the wrong angle, the foot placement's at the wrong angle, and he can Euro step around that, or he can make these weird little. It's really similar to T.J. Warren coming out, for those that remember, as a prospect, where he just finds these small windows of opportunity around the rim and can really exploit them in a way that I don't think anybody else that we've talked about does, at least thus far in this class. I think that the touch is okay around the rim. I think anywhere outside of like right next to the rim, it's questionable for me. But in terms of just being a sheer downhill driver, like if it's a straight line drive, I think that if there's no help, that if he's able to get downhill quick enough and beat the help, it looks really good. Once the help comes, I think it becomes sort of an issue for him. He almost always picks his dribble up. He has to figure out what he wants to do outside of that, because the handle doesn't have any counters is the biggest issue for him. Like he has no counters to get around help, and that really stunts the downhill driving ceiling that he can provide with that. And he's pretty much always forced to pass out of it. It's just not something he's able to get around, and that's really probably for me the biggest thing offensively that's keeping me from really fully buying in, apart from the shot, which we'll get to. But having no counters within the handle is really limiting to the type of player that he projects to be.
Yeah, I think that the easiest way I will frame Thiero is that as of now, I think this is maybe like the boom or bust guy in like the back half of the first round. Like Stone, we were talking a little bit in a group chat earlier today, and you kind of mentioned like this could be the Kawhi Leonard of this draft. In my notes, I had, could this be the Jimmy Butler of this draft? And what I mean by that is there is something special here. The first game I watched at the Arrow was their last game against Alabama. There's a moment in that where he drives straight through 6'10" and not at all skinny Grant Nelson, bumps him out of the way, like coming to a jump stop, realizes there's no one between him and the rim, and just takes off in a phone booth for a dunk. Self-created half-court dunk, just went through the chest of a 6'10", at least like borderline, NBA type athlete. Grant Nelson will probably get a cup of coffee in the league, bounce around on some two ways like a Micah Potter or something like. And Thiero just bumped him out of the way on a straight drive. He has a really solid first step, not like elite. I actually think someone we're going to talk about here in a minute has a better first step, but he's a pretty deadly closeout attacker when he draws them. He just gets on top of the rim in a hurry. And even though the finishing numbers are bad, I think at a certain point, like, I don't care about your layups if you're going to get to the free throw line, if you have a 69.2% free throw rate. Like, I don't care that you don't make layups. He just crashes into dudes. And he is very willing to go seek contact. He has bolder shoulders. I actually don't think he has like a crazy, crazy strong lower body, but he has bolder shoulders. And he will, like it's kind of Julius Randle-esque. Like, he's built differently than Julius Randle. But like, if you go back and watch a young Randle, like with the Lakers or even when he was at Kentucky, like just bumping dudes out of the way. But the difference is that Thiero is just a better vertical athlete than someone like a Randle. I mean, Adou would probably be in the top 5 percentile of functional vertical athletes in the NBA as a rookie. I mean, he's in that like Andre Jackson, type tier. There's probably some other people I'm missing, but his contemporaries athletically are, in terms of ability. I don't even know like what his vertical jump was, because I don't care. I don't care about combine athletic testing. Whatever it was, his ability to access his athleticism in game is pretty much unparalleled with amongst any wings in this class. He dunks off the dribble, he dunks in transition, he dunks in from the dunker spot. There were a couple times where he would get an offensive rebound, bumps up one out of the way, and then just take off two for a dunk like he was a 7-foot center. Like, he is a really insane finisher. It is amongst like the best individual skills is in this whole class is Thiero's ability to get to the rim and score or in one way or another convert, whether he's getting to the line. Again, that's even with the layups being fairly poor. Like, he just and the truth is, I think his finishing is going to improve. I think finishing is one of the easier things to improve in the NBA. Guys figure out how to decel. They tend to figure out how, especially when you're as physically gifted, you tend to figure out how to maximize your bend. And his biggest issues as a finisher is that he's just almost completely out of control, and he's always just jumping into dudes. Which in some ways, like, I honestly kind of like. Like, the worry is a little bit that Thiero he's already 21. I should have said this earlier. He's a May 2004 birthday. He's already 21. He just turned 21, so he won't turn 22 until the end or after his rookie season. So his rookie season will be his age 21 season. So he's not like a spring chicken here, but I don't know. There is something really special with his ability to get downhill and score. The issue is all the connective tissue stuff right now. So, Stone, what you can take us to the shooting, you can take us to the playmaking, wherever you want to go next. What is keeping us from just saying that Thiero might just be a star in the NBA?
Yeah, and I do want to quickly give credit. I think it was Cooper that said he might be the next Kawhi. You'll find out quickly that I am not of that line of thinking, because I do think that he's missing a lot of connectory things that prevent him from being this really great offensive weapon. The passing is almost always out of necessity. It feels like he's always looking to score, and if he can't score, he'll look to pass. But it's never something that he's off the bat reacting to. Like, either I'm gonna pass once something happens that I expect. It's just always I'm gonna score, and if I can't get to the rim as a scorer, I'm gonna pass out. And I think that also puts limitations on his driving equity, where if you're a guy that only passes out of necessity and you're not really looking to make a lot of connective passes, it stifles what he could be as a driver. I think that the shooting for me is really questionable. I should, but I don't have the track record pulled up right here. But I believe it's fairly sketchy, having looked at it previously. Watching the film, it's sketchy. Like, it's the touch is just very, I wouldn't say bad, but below average is probably where I'd pin it. And I think that really shows itself basically anywhere that's not the rim, whether it's mid-range jumpers, whether it's threes. Like, the touch is just, it's real clunky. And I think a lot of the shots that he takes, like, even as a spot up guy, it's really difficult to buy with that sort of touch. It's really difficult to be like confident that he's going to be someone that can be this finishing in 3-point catch and shoot guy, when even the touch catch and shoot is inconsistent and just very clunky when you watch the film. The one thing I do think is he is a good cutter. And that's the one, like, sort of off ball skill and trait that I think will translate. But outside of that, like, it's real limiting. The handle, like, he's not any sort of secondary or tertiary playmaker, because the handle is not good enough, and the passing is just it's not something that it's really a part of his game at this point. I wouldn't say he's a bad passer either. It's just he's never looking to do that. As far as the offense, that's really, like, all I have, to be honest. So we can get into the defense after, but I think offensively, like, that pretty much just sums Thiero up. He's a play finisher. He's a dunker, a great dunker. super strong. The motor is impressive with him. He's if he shoots something around the rim with his inconsistent touch, he's always looking to follow it up and get the board, um, looking to get his own rebound. But I just think there's a lot of missing connective tissue, as you put it, to really buy him as being a top tier offensive weapon at any point.
Yeah, so I do have some numbers on the shooting here. So in his junior season, he's in the 22nd percentile on catch and shoot shots, only 47 attempts, 40.4 effective field goal percentage. Obviously, that's really bad. 32nd percentile off the dribble on 20 attempts, 35% effective field goal percentage. 59th percentile as a sophomore on catch and shoot shots, 24, only 24 attempts. 52.1 effective field goal percentage. So that's kind of, it seems like there was maybe like some upward trend there. Now he did only play, 25 games as a sophomore. And, in terms of minutes, was only at around 21. He was definitely more of like a role player for that Kentucky team. He was out there for his defense and, kind of some athletic havoc creation. But you know, and then as a freshman, 34th percentile on catch and shoots, only 10 attempts. And then in FIBA, he went 0 for 5. So not a particularly good track record as a shooter. The mechanics are legitimately fairly clean. He does have an overly tight base at times. He doesn't hold his posture very well. Like every once in a while, like he'll just kind of throw his back randomly, or he'll kind of start to like sit his hips at a weird time. The ball path is kind of inconsistent. But he's kind of like it kind of just seems like it's a low rep. Like he just hasn't taken a ton of shots. Like he's not comfortable. There's some things I like about it. Like he gets to that turnaround jumper over either shoulder, and I kind of like that as like a 2 foot counter. If he's going to be like a hard downhill driver, if he can get to 2 feet and get to that little fadeaway jumper over either shoulder, I think there's maybe something there in like a prime 2K Rudy Gay type of way, where if you stop him from getting to the rim for a dunk, he'll be able to punish you with an over the shoulder jumper. There's something there. I think that if he really develops into like a star level player, the jumper isn't really that important to me. I think honestly, sometimes, and even I get caught up in this, I think we do sometimes overrate catch and shoot shooting, especially on guys who can attack closeouts, even if they're only like half closeouts. It just kind of depends on the role guys are put in. But if he falls below star outcomes, yeah, I mean, it becomes a big concern, especially because we're going to talk about the defense, but I'm not as big on that. My biggest area of concern with Thiero as like a star bet is that I just don't think the playmaking is very good. His handle in traffic basically doesn't exist. Like he doesn't have one. If there's good help, he kind of has to take his hit. What Thiero is good at as a ball handler is taking one dribble and killing his dribble, and then using his athleticism to bound to the rim. And he's big and he's strong and he's athletic, and that works quite a bit. But what he is good at a little bit is playing out a triple threat too. Like he has some okay jabs and hard rip moves and stuff. He's probably the type of guy who, I would expect to develop like a pretty good little mid post game. They didn't go to that a ton at Arkansas because their spacing was so bad, but I do think like that is where he should, that is a place where he should add value, especially if he's going to be like a 4 in the NBA. If every once in a while you can throw him the ball, on the block or on the elbow or a little bit off the block, and he can face up and either get to like a little jumper, which I think will be fine in time, or use his speed to get by slower guys while using his strength to punish smaller ones. Like that is valuable offense in a way that is often under discussed in the NBA. But there is kind of like caps on how valuable, and with Thiero, his company is interesting. He is for what it's worth. I do think his mentality is pretty good as an offensive player. Like I don't think he's selfish. I think he moves the ball fine, but he's just a really slow processor. He doesn't make reads on the fly. He doesn't read before he catches the ball, which is a big issue. It's someone actually we're gonna. It's again when we talk about Drake Powell, that's something I really like about his game is that he is reading before he catches the ball and he's making decisions before the ball even gets into his hands. With Thiero, there's just that's just not really who he is offensively. He's not that type of playmaker and processor, and some of that is the role he's been put into. And the truth is, it's easy to squint and see some, similarities to guys like Pascal Siakam, or I mentioned Julius Randle, or these like kind of interesting, like, even like a Paolo Banchero, where it's like, man, they kind of feel like men without countries sometimes in the NBA. Like Pascal, is what has gone really underrated for a lot of his career because, well, he wasn't a great shooter, and now he is a very good shooter. But for a long time, they're like, well, he's not a great shooter, so he's just tough to fit with stars. And the truth is, that's just not like that's not always as simple as people think it is. And the level of athlete Thiero is, and the way he kind of covers ground and bounds, and all those type of things. There's some obvious star equity here. I think it's pretty obvious, but you do worry about what a floor looks like right now. So I don't know. That's we'll kind of wrap up some more of the offense here in a minute. But Stone, let's transition to the defense because I do think this is where I differ from a lot of people. What were your kind of overall impressions of him as a defender?
To be honest, a lot of mid is really where I fall. I did not come away overly impressed. I don't think he's below average or anything, but I would say an average defender is kind of, in essence, where I fall with him. Um, I do think that against quicker guys on the perimeter, with the athleticism that he shows vertically, and just as an athlete in general, like I didn't expect him to get blown by as much by quicker guys as much as he did. Like I thought that if you can get a quicker guard onto him, they're probably going to get past him. Um, I think that it's more of a pet peeve thing than an actual. It's as big of a deal that I'm going to make it, but like he has a lot of half-assed digs and just like doesn't fully commit as a help defender in a way that I think actually, he could be really impactful if he did those things with a lot more effort than he does. For as strong as the motor is on offense, I would have thought that those things would be at more of a consistent effort level than he put forth. Um, I think that what I did like is he can contain like wings and forwards. He's able to make some like pretty ridiculous blocks. He'll leave the ground pretty quickly after the shot is put up, and he can make some jump shot blocks. He can make blocks around the rim. With the wingspan that he has and the verticality that he has, like probably playing a low man role is idealistic in my opinion for him. But he's not as versatile as I would have thought or hoped, having watched the things that he can do athletically, offensively, and just by looking at his frame. But I think in that sort of low man role, he can be really effective. He can be someone that he gets his hands on a lot of balls for strips when they're going up. When someone does like a power dribble, picks the ball up and goes up to put like a little hook shot up. He can get his hand on there with his massive hands and rip the ball from them before they get into the shooting motion. Like there's a lot of things with him in that specific role that I really like. But when you start putting that on the perimeter, you put him at the point of attack. I think things fall apart kind of quickly for him. You put him at the nail, he just is not as impactful. It feels like he doesn't want to be necessarily, and I'm not going to speak for him, but just based on watching the film, like it feels like he doesn't really want to be in that kind of role, and therefore puts less effort forth in that role. But I'm somewhat conflicted. I don't think he's a great defender outside of the low man role specifically, but I think He has all the tools in the frame to be that. I didn't see it put to use in film.
Yeah, I mean, I would say right now he's pretty much an actively bad defender against good teams. I did the math on this. 17 of his 46 steals, or 36%, came in 5 games against mediocre to awful low major teams. Uh, Another 3 came in a game against Lipscomb, which is, was a good low major. So I don't want to take anything away from that necessarily, but he dominated that team athletically. When he is playing against guys that he can't just overwhelm athletically, which he couldn't in the SEC, it looked a whole lot worse. And I think that's reflected in the fact that, he had a 3.4 steal rate overall in the season. Against top 50 talent, it dropped. My BART is not loading, and I should have wrote this down. But it dropped, enough to be, a bit of a worry for me. So I just am not really sure that he's actually the level of defensive production guy that I think some people think he is. Like, he's a good straight line athlete, but I think the change of direction is pretty rough. He is, his ground coverage is, fairly mediocre because of that. And the lateral quickness is not great. And for me, the biggest issue is I think he has like all-time bad reaction time right now. If he can't predict what is going to happen, he is not going to react in time for it. And he's a smart enough player to get away with predicting a lot. But he is so behind in terms of reacting to what is happening. There are multiple passes in games I've seen that literally like pass right by his face before he reacts to them. Multiple steals he should have had, blocks he could have had, all that type of stuff. He's also just, for someone as strong as he doesn't use his strength well on defense. He's more of a finesse shot blocker, instead of one who's going to meet plays out in front, like with his chest, and really try and deter finishers. He wants to twist and block shots and do all that stuff instead of, being powerful with his strength. These are things that you can learn, but at a certain point, I do think there's a sort of cap here defensively in that, again, this goes some positionally. I think he's a 4. I don't think there's a ton of positional versatility here on either end. As much as I said like a Jimmy Butler or whatever, he's not a Jimmy Butler on defense. He's much closer to me to like a Julius Randle on defense, or even like a Pascal Siakam. At his high end, he could be a better version of those types of guys. I'm blanking on names right now, but I think he's fairly position locked. His vertical ability at the rim is obvious. I think if you can find ways to keep him as the low guy without having to do long closeouts, I think he'd be good. Or at least he would have the potential to be good, even though I don't love his shot blocking. He makes some really good rim rotations when drivers are out of control, right? And they can't punish him for passing, but he's very he's very Walker Kessler-esque in that he's kind of all or nothing, right? He's got to meet someone all the way outside of the paint, and he's not. If he gets fooled, he's not going to be able to react quick enough to recover. I also just don't think the motor is like elite. He is like an overall like tough guy, and he'll have moments where he really turns the motor on, but it's not just like when we talked about Nique Clifford, Nique's motor is just nonstop, right? It just goes and goes and goes. That's not how Thiero's motor is. Thiero's motor is much more start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. And that's just harder for me to buy in terms of him like developing into some elite defensive player. I think he's going to be the type of defender who is potentially good for his archetype if he's a really high volume, rim scorer. But I also think that there's a world where, if the offense doesn't develop in the way it needs to, the defense is not going to keep him in the league like I think it could with maybe a couple of these other guys. And that kind of takes me to some overall value here. I think the biggest thing, Thiero is like a lesser version of what we talked about with Harper, where he's kind of someone with not very many floor raising skills, in my opinion. He has an obvious ceiling skill, which is his ability to get to the rim and dunk or get fouled, and an improvable thing with his finishing. The jumper, I think, is always going to be a question. I think it's the type of thing like we've seen with guys like this, like a Julius Randle or like a Pascal Siakam or other guys kind of that ilk, where they're not good jump shooters for long portions of their career, but they stay in the league long enough thanks to their athleticism, thanks to their finishing ability, and the fact that those guys were fortunate enough to be on teams that really took care of their development and or needed them to just play minutes, which is would be huge for Thiero. And so those guys really developed over the course of time and have got to the point where they are good jump shooters. I think Thiero could do that. I'd be shocked if he is a good jump shooter by the end of his rookie contract. But by the time he is a player on a good team, I could see him absolutely developing as a shooter. Or I could also see him being the type of guy that dominates for like a stretch of his career without the jump shot, and then as the athleticism starts to wane, the jump shot starts to tick up. Like I think he has that, but I would not expect him to be a good jump shooter anytime soon. He's not going to be particularly great, like role player defensively. I think he can do some things, and he could probably guard some fours pretty well. Though again, he's not as like tough defensively as I wish he was sometimes in terms of using his physicality on that end. He can kind of get pushed around sometimes or be a little bit contact avoidant for my taste on that end, which is not great. But offensively, it's all about, can he, be a solid enough passer and playmaker, and can the handle be solid enough to take advantage of the athleticism and rim pressure that's going to come from his driving. Because one of the biggest red flags for me on tape with Thiero is that he didn't bring the ball up in transition at all. Like when he would get a rebound, he was always looking for an outlet. And this is the type of guy who I think, to be who he wants to be in the NBA, should be grabbing and really pushing the ball and trying to see if he can just, get his shoulder down and score on someone. And that's something that can come. And that's why, like, it's hard for me to be really low on Thiero. Like, at a certain point, there's a guy I have to take in the first round because the good might just be too good. And that's a guy that I want to at least get in my program and see how I feel about. But there's nothing I'm in love with here, other than that star, that dazzling upside. The rest for me is a pretty big question. Stone, where are you at with Thiero overall?
Yeah, I think the handle's like the biggest thing for me, right? Because in this sort of role that he'll be in, at least early on, especially without a jumper, of being this play finisher, this striker, like he becomes essentially he has to be someone that is like created for in basically every circumstance. Like unless it's like a wide open lane, he can attack that, or a wide open, like a really bad closeout, he can attack. But with any sort of help or anything, and like you kind of pointed to, and I had it in my notes too, he should be a way better transition player than he probably will be, because there are multiple times in transition where he's running down the court in transition at full speed, and someone just comes in front of him in a defensive stance, and he can't get around them because he doesn't have any sort of counter with his handle. And it pretty much just stifles the transition. He has to wait for someone else to come up alongside him to pass out of that. Like it just limits him so much by not having any sort of counter. And without that, or without the shot, that in my view is, maybe it comes around to average at some point, but I'm not banking on it by any means. Like it's not, I'm not drafting him to thinking that he's going to be a solid answer as a catch and shoot guy. It'd be icing on the cake, but like I'm not betting on that coming to fruition. And defensively, like I think there's real limitations there too. Um, and so that just kind of leaves me thinking that he's a half court rim finisher as a forward, which is somewhat difficult to really extrapolate the most value out of. I feel like in a good offense. So I have him still as a firmly draftable guy, but he's someone that I would take more in the second round. And I'm going ahead in terms of my film watching, so I'm watching at a faster pace than we're recording right now. So I'm keeping two separate boards, one of guys that we've recorded on, one's my actual board that I'm watching the film on. But in terms of the guys that we've recorded on, I have him right at 20 right now. In on my board, he's probably going to be lower than that on my actual board as we watch more players and get to them. But he's someone that has a second round caliber um, grade on him for me.
Yeah, that's fair. I understand that. I just think for me, it's hard for me to not bet on the star outcome at least a little bit. And I think there's teams that I would really consider taking that swing, in the mid to late first. For what it's worth, for me right now, on my guys we've talked about draft board, he is at 17, in a tier with guys like Colin Murray Boyles, Colin Malawak, Jace Richardson, and VJ Edgecombe, and someone we're about to talk about.
Hey guys, I'm hopping in here as the editor to make my opinions known on Thiero. I'm a little higher than Bryson Stone. Personally, I think that Thiero is the kind of player that we have seen in the last few playoffs just completely spike in value. A guy who is not giving up very much size on the perimeter and especially on the interior. Bryce talked a little bit about his shot blocking, but I do think that it was very clear that this is a guy who can do NBA level 4 stuff, right? He can make the rotations. His hands are really good. He's a little slow as a processor, I will fully admit, but the fact he can get out there, block shots, time stuff up, that's a lot more valuable. And I think getting the real reps in an NBA system, which he will because of his ability to just overwhelm physically on offense, especially for the right team. I think he's just going to be such an easy value add early that he'll be able to find a spot long-term defensively, right? They talked a little bit about him as TJ Warren, and I think that's really interesting because Warren is exactly the kind of guy who, if he was healthy, would be adding so much value in these last few playoffs to the right team. We see Julius Randle sucked all season long, comes to the right team as a secondary, tertiary scorer, and all of a sudden he's one of the most valuable players in the playoffs. Like, it's just that simple. These kinds of guys who can get you a bucket. I think Thiero can score from multiple spots on the floor, relies a bit too much on his athleticism, and he's not like a huge bag guy necessarily, but I do think that the Arkansas floor, Cal recruited and his team building was just so bad. It was awful. And I really think that ate into any of Thiero's attempts to drive, unless he was just like football running backing his way into the paint. He would get stripped because there's no spacing. They do not care that Carter Knox is on the perimeter or any of these guys are out there taking shots. So they're completely collapsing every single time Thiero drives. And I think on an NBA floor that is wider, and there's not a single team in NBA history that is as poorly spaced as that Arkansas team. Like even the Detroit Pistons from a few years ago. No, they're not that badly spaced. And I think that star upside is too much to handle. And even if his floor is a guy who's just like out of the league, because he's too slow of a processor. I think that the bet on shot blocking, the spot up shooting, I buy long term, and just elite north south athlete is too much to not bet on. I am going to have him in my lottery. I think he's going to be my very last lottery guy. I'll have him below Trey Johnson because I buy Trey Johnson's elite skill more. But I think that the toolsy stuff, the toolsy kind of outlier things, give him a little bit of real development that's not under Coach Cal, the terrorist, and he's going to be a really valuable rotation player. So I'm a lot more in on Thiero than those guys. I agree with a lot of what they said specifically, but I find it hard not to take the swing on a guy who just had like the worst possible scenario in a lot of different ways and is still going to come out and make an impact in the league. Thank you so much for listening to the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast here on YouTube. If you want to check out more of our stuff, you can follow us on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. You can check out our website, upsideswings.com. You can follow all of us on Twitter, subscribe here on YouTube for more content coming down the line. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know your thoughts on this pod and, our process in the comments. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
So just how good of a downhill driver and scorer is Thiero? Stone, you're muted.
There we go. Hopefully Cooper has fun editing this.